Let's talk about mixing bass guitar today. I saw a comment in one of my last videos that was asking specifically about how to approach bass. So I thought it would be a good example to dive into my song Drift and kind of break down the chain here and talk about some essential kind of principles that you can apply to mixing bass. And I want to give the caveat that there's a lot of different ways to mix bass. There's a lot of different sounds people go for. This is definitely more of a, I guess, kind of indie rock approach to bass. It's very mid-range forward. There's some kind of chorus modulation on it. So this is going to really be talking about that specific sound. But that said, there's probably things you can take away and apply to other genres as well. All right, so let's listen to a little bit of the song first. Okay, so jumping right in, here is what I recorded. So this is just the raw bass DI. I'm gonna go ahead and bypass all plugins. So one thing to note is with this bass tone, I used a bass that had flat wound strings on it. So that's automatically going to give you a kind of more muted, softer tone. And then I also used kind of a blend of the bridge and the middle pickup on my bass. And I used a pick as well. So I wanted this to be more mid-range forward. So that was kind of the best thing to start with for me. So that's a really important part if you're recording the bass and mixing it, is to really pick out the best settings, the best technique that's going to really fit your track to begin with, so you don't end up fighting against that in the mix. And another important thing here to note is that I actually split out the bass into two parts, so I can treat the low end of the bass different from the high end. So you heard the bass DI, now let's hear, I processed it through an amp sim. So I think I used, the Ampeg B15. As the main amp sound, and then I process that through a little bit of EQ and compression that I have outboard gear for, and I committed that. So here's how that sounds. Okay, so the plan of attack on this bass is to really separate the low end from the high end. So using a linear phase EQ, you can basically filter off everything above your chosen crossover point. So that's going to be 250 hertz here. And then I also went ahead and rolled off the like super deep subby stuff because we don't really need that. It's going to kind of clutter up the low end subs and just sound a little bit looser than we need. And then you just have bass. And then you kind of do the opposite with the other channel. So everything above 250 using the same slope, same frequency, same Q, and a linear phase EQ, so that when you piece them together, it just sounds like a bass guitar. And then I have these routed together on a bus so that we can treat them separately, but also together. And the next thing is to really compress the low end. So when it comes to bass guitar, your playing can really vary how much low end power you have behind each note. And sometimes even just the way basses resonate in certain notes. So adding a lot of compression, in this case, I'm just using an 1176 just to really tighten it up and to make it feel solid in every note. So I'm going to turn this on. So I have a slower attack and a kind of medium fast release, so that it's getting, between 3 to 7 dB of compression at all times. And so now we have a really controlled low end that's going to be a good foundation. So on the bass amp part of the sound, after filtering that off, I added some distortion. So I used some tube distortion and I added it in parallel. And I really like this plugin because you can attenuate the high frequencies so it doesn't get too I don't know, you can get sort of a weird crackliness to distortion on especially low-end heavy instruments, like bass. And I don't really want this to sound like a guitar. I want it to be really kind of mid-range focused distortion. So here's how that sounds. And then bypassed. So it's fairly subtle, but it just gives it a little bit more presence in the mix too. And the next thing I did was add some chorus, because this song has a little bit of an 80s vibe to it, and I wanted to emphasize that and also bring some stereo width to the sound. And so together with the low end, things are sounding good now, and from here I really treat it as just one instrument. So after I get kind of the general sound going with the DI low end and the bass amp high end, now we can treat the bass bus. This part really is kind of listening to it in context and kind of figuring out what it needs to fit better into the mix. So here I did a little bit more kind of scooping out of those low mids, bringing out some low end, a little bit more mid-range presence, and then rolling off some top end. So let's listen to this in context, or at least with just the rhythm section right now. Yeah, even just with the drums, it kind of fits better when you add that EQ. And then this compressor is just to kind of compress them together and give them more character. It's not necessarily because I need more dynamic control, but this particular Fairchild 660 plugin just has a ton of unique vibe to it that sounds really cool. So as I was mixing this further, I think I wanted to hear the bass stand out a bit more. And CQ is kind of a go-to plugin for me when it comes to boosting mid-range. You know, I could go back and just boost mid-range here on this EQ or, you know, somewhere else in the chain. But I really do think that analog EQ plugins each have their own unique sound, their own unique frequency curves. And so I like to use different ones and kind of build them on top of each other and take advantage of what they do best. Let's listen to it in context, and then I'll bring it in. I'll start with it bypassed. Bypassed. So it's just bringing a little bit more detail to the pick attack. And then Radiator. So this is an awesome plugin just when you really want something to feel like it's being pushed through an amp a little bit harder. Is this, you know, a make or break plugin to add? No. But I do like what it's doing, especially what it's doing to the low end. It just somehow makes it feel a little bit deeper sounding to me. And then here we have some further EQ and some sidechain EQ. So this is kind of getting the kick and bass to fit together while getting the most weight out of each of them. Sidechain compression like this can be helpful if you feel like your kick drum's not really punching through in the low end the way you want it to, and you just want to add a little bit more clarity in the low end overall. And then these little small moves here were just like frequencies that started poking out and bothering me in the mix. So I just adjusted them here after the rest of the chain, because if I go earlier in the chain, every EQ move starts to affect the distortion. So it's often kind of a safer bet to EQ afterwards if you just want to tuck in frequencies and not change anything else about the sound. I have a send that's a really short slapback delay. So this is something I often do on bass. It's offset left and right, 40 milliseconds and about 50, filtered to just be in the upper mid-range. And all that does is really just kind of spread out the bass, give it a sense of stereo depth. Here's without and with. And all together in the track again. I drive into the familiar dark with the windows down, the smell of pine. So there you go, that's bass guitar. Just for fun, let's listen to no plugins on the bus. And turn them back on. And that's how I mix the bass guitar for this song. So things to take away. Number one, low end compression to make sure you even out just the power and weight of each note of the bass guitar. Number two is adding more distortion to the upper mid-range of your bass, and also getting to play with kind of stereo width just in the mid-range so that you're not kind of blurring your low end. And then on the bus side of things, using other things to build character, compressors, other types of distortion, analog EQs can be really effective to bring more presence to your bass guitar. And side chaining if you really want to emphasize kind of a more punchy low end. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions down in the comments. If this was helpful, I hope you can take some things away to apply to your own mixes.